Most people think strength means throwing the first punch, but the most powerful thing a human being can do is walk into a room full of fear and refuse to become it. The old farmer sat slumped in the corner booth of the Prairie Rose Saloon, blood trickling from his split lip, his weathered hands trembling around an empty whiskey glass. That's how things worked in the forgotten corners of Wyoming, where justice was as scarce as rain in August. And Thomas Whitmore had always believed that if you kept your head down and caused no trouble, trouble would leave you alone. He was about to learn how wrong a good man can be. Thomas had been a proud man once, back when his wife was alive and his ranch breathed under the endless prairie sky. But the years had worn him down like wind on stone. His cattle were gone, sold off one by one to cover debts. His land was mortgaged to the bank. All he had left was his daughter Clara, his dignity, and one weekly drink to remind himself he was still a man. On this particular Tuesday evening, a stranger named Cole had taken one of those things from him over nothing more than an accidental glance. Cole wore his cruelty like a badge of honor. He'd drifted into town 3 days prior with two other men, the kind who made decent folk cross to the other side of the street. They'd been drinking since noon. Cole had been hunting for something to break since the moment he woke up mean that morning. When Thomas accidentally caught his eye at the bar, Cole saw exactly what he'd been looking for: someone who wouldn't fight back. Predators always recognize that. They don't search for the strongest person in the room. Yet they search for the one who's already given up. The old man never saw the first punch coming. By the time he hit the floor, blood was staining the sawdust and the piano had gone silent. Cole stood over him, waiting for him to rise so he could knock him down again. When Thomas stayed down, Cole spit on him and returned to his whiskey, satisfied. This is the psychology of cruelty. It feeds on surrender. It grows wherever people decide that looking away costs less than standing up. But two people in that town had made a different decision a long time ago. The doors swung open, and Clara Whitmore stepped inside, with Henry following close behind. The sight stopped every conversation in the room. Clara was 26 years old, with her mother's fierce eyes and her father's stubborn jaw. She worked the neighboring ranch as a horse trainer, at the best in 3 counties, and she had learned long ago that in this world, you don't get to choose whether hard things happen to you. You only get to choose what kind of person you are when they do. Henry was different from most men. He was a blacksmith with gentle hands and a poet's heart who had loved Clara quietly since they were children. He stood 6 foot 4 with shoulders broad as a barn door, but everyone in town knew he wouldn't harm a soul unless that soul threatened someone he loved. That distinction matters. There is a profound difference between a person who is dangerous because they are angry and a person who is dangerous because they have decided what they will and will not allow. Henry was the second kind. When Clara had heard what happened through the telegraph operator's wife, she found Henry at his forge and said just 2 words: "I need you." She didn't explain. She didn't bargain. She trusted that 2 words were enough for the right person, and she was correct. Clara's eyes swept the room, found her father in the corner, then moved to Cole at the bar. She walked forward with measured steps, her boots echoing on the wooden floor. Not rushing, not trembling. There's a lesson buried right there that most people never learn. Panic makes you smaller. Stillness makes you larger. "You put your hands on my father," she said, and her voice carried to every corner of the room. Cole turned slowly, a smirk playing at the edge of his mouth. That old fool had it coming. "Maybe you want some too, sweetheart." His companions laughed, but the laughter died when they saw Henry step forward beside her, filling the doorway like something immovable. That's the other thing most people misunderstand about courage. It isn't about going alone. It's about knowing who stands with you before the moment ever arrives. "I'll give you one chance," Clara said, her hand still at her side. "Apologize to him and walk away." What Cole didn't know was that Clara had been shooting since she was 8 years old. What he didn't know was that Henry had once stopped a spooked stallion barehanded to save a child. What Cole had never understood about the world was this: the people who look like they won't fight back are sometimes the only ones who have truly decided what they're fighting for. Cole's hand moved toward his gun, but he never cleared leather. Clara's draw was lightning, her barrel leveled at his chest before his fingers found his grip. I said apologize, she repeated, and this time the iron in her voice made even hardened men take a step back. The saloon held its breath. Cole's face moved from red to white as the reality of his miscalculations settled in. Henry took one step forward, just one, and that single step said everything that words never could. Cole's hands went up. All right, all right, I'm sorry. We'll leave. Not yet, Clara said. First, you help my father to his feet. Then you pay for his drink. Then you get on your horses, ride out of this territory, and never come back. Her voice never wavered, never rose, but it carried the weight of every wrong that had ever been done to her family, every year of hardship they had endured. Every morning, her father woke up with less than he'd had the day before and chose to keep going anyway. She didn't need to shout. When you know exactly what you stand for, the room already understands. Cole did exactly as she said. His companions were already backing toward the door. They helped Thomas to his feet. They paid the bartender twice the cost of the old man's drink, and they rode out into the gathering dusk like ghosts fleeing daylight, which is exactly what small men do when they finally meet someone who doesn't need their approval to feel whole. Clara holstered her gun and wrapped her arm around her father's shoulders. Henry took his other side. Together, the three of them walked out of the prairie rose into the cool evening air. Behind them, the piano started playing again, and the bartender poured drinks for a room full of people who had just witnessed something worth remembering: that sometimes, when the systems meant to protect us fail, the only thing standing between a good person and a bad outcome is the ones who love them enough to show up. Thomas looked at his daughter, at this fierce woman who had become everything her mother had been, and more. He looked at Henry, who had come without question because he was needed and because that was simply the kind of man he had decided to be. I'm sorry you had to see me like this, he whispered. Clara squeezed his shoulder tighter. Papa, she said quietly, I'm proud to be your daughter. And that, more than any gunshot, more than any threat or triumph, was the real victory, not the moment the bully backed down. But the moment a father heard from his child that who he was, not what he owned, not how strong he stood, was still worth something. That's the truth no hardship can take from you if you've raised someone who sees it. The people worth having in your corner aren't the ones who show up when it's easy. They're the ones who come when you send two words and they already know.